All right, today we're diving into the story of a man who was, well, he was more than just a leader. He was like a ghost, a specter that literally haunted the nightmares of an entire empire. This is the story of Zumbi, the Shadow King of Brazil.
So where does a story like this even begin? It's not in some fancy city or a grand palace. Nope, it starts right here, in a place where you could actually smell freedom in the air, not the stench of chains. This hidden fortress, this sanctuary, was called Palmares, and it was basically a sovereign state, completely invisible to the colonial powers that surrounded it.
So how did this kingdom even work? Let's take a look at the structure of Palmares, this incredible society that grew right in the middle of colonial Brazil.
Okay, so the official term for a place like Palmares was a macro Quilombo. And that sounds kind of academic, but what it really means is this wasn't just some small village where people were hiding out. Oh no. This was a massive, complex confederation. Think of it like a network of towns, each with its own laws, its own farms, its own defenses. It was, for all intents and purposes, a nation hiding within an empire.
And right at the heart of this incredible place is the man himself, Zumbi. He was actually born free in Palmares, but, well, destiny had a cruel twist in store. When he was just a little kid, about 6 years old, he was captured. He was suddenly thrown into the world of his enemies, given a new name, forced into a new religion, and even taught Latin. They were basically trying to groom him, to turn him into one of them, part of the very system that enslaved his own people.
But here's the thing. You just can't erase where you come from. And this leads us to this incredible, pivotal moment in Zumbi's life. A single choice that wouldn't just define him, but would literally change the entire course of resistance in Brazil. Forever.
So picture this. You're 15 years old, and you're Zumbi, standing at a massive crossroads. Down one path, you've got the world of the priest. It offers comfort, a good education, and you'd probably be safe. But then there's the other path, the call of the jungle, the call of Palmares. That life is all about struggle. It's about constant danger. But it's also about who you really are, your identity, your roots. And above all else, it's about freedom.
And what did he do? He did what most would consider unthinkable. He ran. He chose that dangerous path right back into the mountains, back to his people, because he realized something profound. A gilded cage is still just a cage. Comfortable slavery is no replacement for a hard-won freedom.
So he gets back to Palmares, and let me tell you, he rises through the ranks fast. He wasn't just some brave warrior, though. He was a true military genius, and he would end up defending his kingdom for decades.
So what made him such a genius? It was how he fought. He perfected guerrilla warfare. He looked at that dense, terrifying jungle not as a problem, but as his single greatest weapon. His warriors, they moved like shadows. They'd strike with lightning speed and deadly precision, and then just vanish, just melt back into the trees. It left the Portuguese soldiers completely terrified, basically fighting ghosts and their own fear.
And then comes another one of these huge defining moments. The Portuguese governor, just sick and tired of fighting this phantom army, offers a peace treaty. And it sounds pretty good on the surface, right? Freedom for anyone born in Palmares, which included Zumbi. But there's a catch, a huge one. Anyone who had recently escaped to Palmares would have to be handed back over, returned to slavery. So I'm asking you, what would you do in that situation? Would you take the deal?
Well, Zumbi's answer was immediate. It was absolute. He refused, flat out. For him, freedom wasn't something you negotiated. It wasn't something you compromised on. A peace deal that meant selling out his own brothers and sisters, that wasn't peace. That was surrender. So he chose to keep fighting for total freedom.
And that refusal? It just poured gasoline on the fire. The war was back on, bigger than ever. With every single battle, the legend of Zumbi just grew and grew. The Portuguese would throw everything they had at him, launching these massive attacks.
And right when they thought, okay, we finally have him cornered, poof, Zumbi and his warriors would just be gone, vanished back into the jungle like they were never there. And then, out of nowhere, he'd reappear, launching these brutal counterattacks when they were least expecting it. This cycle just kept repeating. Attack, vanish, reappear. It drove the Portuguese to a pretty terrifying conclusion for them. They started to believe Zumbi was immortal, that he was some kind of unstoppable spirit of war that just couldn't be killed.
But, as we all know, no single person can fight an entire empire forever. And this brings us to the final chapter of his life.
And paradoxically, it's the fall of his kingdom that actually guaranteed his story would never, ever die.
So, after almost 100 years of holding out, the main fortress of Palmares finally fell in 1694. They brought in heavy artillery, cannons, the whole deal. Zumbi himself managed to escape, and he kept on fighting from the wilderness for nearly 2 more years. But in the end, what brought him down wasn't a bigger army or a better weapon. It was betrayal. One of his own commanders was captured, tortured, and finally gave up his secret location. And on November 20th, 1695, the Shadow King was ambushed and killed.
The Portuguese governor, thinking he'd finally won, ordered Zumbi's head to be put on a spike in a public square. The goal was simple: destroy the myth. Prove to everyone that he was just a man, that resistance was pointless. But oh man, did that backfire. In trying to prove he was mortal, they made him a martyr. They turned a man into an idea, and you can't kill an idea.
And that date, November 20th, the day he was killed, that date would be burned into the memory of Brazil forever.
Because today, that exact date is now a national holiday. It's Brazil's National Black Consciousness Day. It's a day for pride, for remembering, and for celebrating resistance. It's just incredible proof that Zumbi's spirit, his fight for freedom, lived on long after he was gone.
His legacy really became, as one writer so beautifully put it, the axe that breaks the frozen sea within us. What a line, right? He represents that power we all have to just shatter our own complacency and fight for what's right, no matter what the odds are. His story is still inspiring people today to stand up to injustice.
And that brings us right back around to that final haunting question. It's the same one Zumbi had to answer. You're offered peace, but it means leaving some of your brothers and sisters in chains. Do you take it? Or do you have the courage to choose the war for total freedom? It's a heavy question, and it's one that echoes all the way from the jungles of Palmares right into our lives today.